The Discovery, Chapter 18, Part 2. Celestia approached Twilight with a mix of emotions in place of her usual regal poker face. Twilight quickly hugged her before pulling away and sighing.
I don't know what happened. No pony here can tell me anything, and Midnight is so distraught that she can barely speak to any pony right now. I wish I had some good news for you, Princess.
Twilight said.
I understand. Thank you, Twilight. Let me talk to the receptionist for a moment. I might be able to at least see how he's doing in the emergency room.
Celestia replied, warmth returning to her voice, if only for a short time.
Of course, Princess.
Celestia walked over to the receptionist with determination in every step. The receptionist in question appeared to be in her late 30s. She had an orange red coat, along with a scarlet mane and tail. Her spectacles were broad-rimmed and bright red.
Excuse me?
Celestia asked. The receptionist dropped everything she was doing upon hearing Celestia's voice. She quickly turned to see the alabaster alicorn and dropped into a bow.
Oh, Your Highness, I'm so sorry I didn't see you come in. I've just been so busy this past night. How can I help you?
She asked, her voice more than a little shaky.
Please, relax. I'm just here for a friend. Is David Lawson out of the emergency room yet?
Celestia asked with calculated calmness and regal poise.
I'll check right now, Princess,
she said, before galloping off down the hall. Celestia allowed herself a thin smile at her little victory, before turning around and walking back over to Midnight. As she approached, she couldn't help but feel a small bit of relief upon seeing two wings tightly wrapped around the distraught mare.
I believe we should get a more desirable answer soon enough. I'm sure that we'll at least know the situation, rather than being left in the dark, as Midnight has this whole night.
Celestia said, her gaze focused on Luna.
I hope so. The poor girl has been all alone most of the night.
Luna trailed off.
I don't believe I caught your name, miss.
Luna asked, looking at Storm.
Stormshield, Your Highness. I'm a royal guard. David is one of my best friends, so I came as soon as I heard the news.
Storm explained.
Stormshield. Ah, yes, I remember you. You were the pony who applied for the position and had cupcake frosting on your muzzle during the interview.
Celestia reminisced. Storm's cheeks flushed a hot pink, and she sheepishly nodded.
Oh, yep, that was me. Don't think any pony will let me forget about that one.
Storm said with a small pout. Celestia brought a hoof to her mouth to cover her giggles, while Luna did the same. After taking a moment to compose themselves, the royal sisters refocused their attention to Storm.
So, how did you meet him?
Luna asked.
Well, do you remember when David first got here?
At Luna's nod, Storm continued.
So, you also remember that he had a thing for petting ponies, right?
Luna and Celestia chuckled and smiled, giving some indication that they did.
Well, one time he tried to pet Prince Blueblood and, well, he kinda demanded that we arrest David for degrading him like that.
Storm said with air quotes. Luna and Celestia shared a knowing yet annoyed look.
Oh, yes, I remember getting the paperwork on my desk about that incident.
Celestia mused.
Well, I was assigned to the prince at the time, and he had me arrest David. Of course, I let him go the second we were out of earshot. But David was a little distraught after that, what with a crash, Equestria being completely new to him, and certain nobles treating him like dirt. So I just kinda talked to him. He was really funny and cuddly, which I'm not gonna lie, he's really good at.
Storm explained.
He's the cuddliest stallion I've ever met.
Midnight interjected, a very small smile on her lips as she reminisced.
He sure is.
Storm continued, gently rubbing Midnight's back with her wing.
Anyways, after we talked for a bit, he had to go meet with Princess Twilight, and I went about my day. I think that's when he dropped the potted plants on Prince Blueblood.
Storm finished with a stroke of her chin.
I recall hearing about that,
Luna said with a chuckle.
If ever there was a prince to deserve that, it would most definitely be Blueblood,
Celestia said with a grin.
So that's why he was late that day,
Twilight said, having moved to Celestia's side during the story.
Excuse me, Princess?
The receptionist called from the desk. Celestia turned around to see the receptionist standing next to an exhausted-looking surgeon. He was a sky blue unicorn with a darker blue mane and tail. His scrubs were splattered with blood in certain areas, and the bags under his hazel eyes gave the impression that he hadn't slept for days. His fur was slightly matted and sticky where blood had found its way past the scrubs. Midnight nearly fainted upon seeing him.
Yes?
Celestia asked, her voice more than a little strained after seeing the surgeon.
This is Dr. Stable. He can answer all of your questions,
the receptionist stated. Dr. Stable took a moment to remove his scrubs with his magic and deposit them in a medical waste bin further down the hall. He quickly used his magic to rid himself of the blood still clinging to his coat before turning and trotting back to Celestia. "Princess," he said with a quick bow.
Doctor, can you tell us what happened?
Celestia asked. Dr. Stable sighed. He took a moment to think before he addressed Celestia again. "Perhaps it would be best if I took you to him," he said.
Where?
Midnight said, jumping out Luna and Stormy's feathery embrace. "I'm afraid only the princesses or family are allowed to see the patient at the moment, miss," Dr. Stable said. Before Midnight could even begin to verbally assault the stallion, Celestia spoke up.
Midnight is David's significant other. The rest of us are his friends. We're all going in to see him,
Celestia said, her glare making the doctor audibly gulp. "Of course, Your Highness, I didn't know. This way, please," he said, before turning tail and leading them down the hall. As they walked, Midnight trotted up alongside Celestia.
Thank you, Princess. You have every right to see him. Think nothing of it,
Celestia responded with a smile. After a few minutes, they arrived at a long hallway. At the end of the hallway was a rather large door labeled Non-Ponies. The group quickly approached the door. Before they could enter, Dr. Stable turned around and addressed the group. "Alright, I think it's important that I let you know the situation before you go in there," he started, focusing his gaze on Midnight. "We had a very hard time getting the bleeding under control. For a while we weren't sure as to where it was coming from. It took more time than I would have liked to find out that he was suffering from a brain hemorrhage. I'm not going to sugarcoat this, as I need you to understand how severe the situation really is." His gaze now fell on the whole group. "We almost lost him. A few times. We had to drill a hole in his skull to allow the blood room to go so as not to crush his brain. At the moment, he's stable, although he's lost over a liter of blood. And, well..." He trailed off.
What? What else is there?
Luna asked quickly. "We'll have the brain scans in a few minutes. It'll be easier to explain if I have those to show you. In the meantime, you should all go see him. He's in a medically induced coma at the moment, so please don't move him," Dr. Stable explained, opening the door with his magic. Midnight was the first into the room. Twilight and Storm weren't far behind, and coming in last were Celestia and Luna. They all froze as soon as their eyes fell on David's body. A rhythmic beeping filled the air as the 5 equines stood in a metaphorical stare down with David's nearly lifeless body. A heart monitor, an ECMO machine, as well as an EKG were all hooked up to David. Dozens of wires connected him to multiple monitors, keeping him alive. Midnight felt her blood run cold when her gaze fell onto the bloodied bandages wrapped around his head, almost covering his eyes. The stains of split blood littered his face and upper torso, and it was all Midnight could do to not begin hyperventilating on the spot. David was wrapped up in several blankets up to his torso. His hands hung limply to the side with several wires dangling off his fingertips. For a few seconds, Midnight only stared. She couldn't move. She couldn't think or speak. Her heart felt like it was being ripped in half all over again, only this time, it was thrown into a blender for good measure.
David?
Midnight stuttered. There was no response, only the constant beeping of the heart monitor. Storm was the first to truly snap out of her trance and move her legs. She slowly inched forwards until she was only a few feet away from David. After a few moments, she turned and motioned for Midnight to come over. Despite feeling like her hooves were rooted to the ground, Midnight pressed forward. Slowly but surely, she found herself right beside Storm, at David's side. Her eyes, already puffy and red after hours of crying, began to tear up again. She managed to hold them back while she gently reached forward with her hoof and touched David's hand. Were it not for the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor, Midnight would have been sure David was dead. His hand was cold to the touch, and seemed completely devoid of life as her hoof softly caressed it. Celestia felt her own tears threatening to claw their way free, and only managed to compose herself when she noticed Storm's teary-eyed expression. Luna turned to her sister to speak, but couldn't find the words. Her mouth moved to speak, but nothing came out. She slowly turned back to David before hanging her head low. A gentle caress against her wither pulled her attention back to her sister. Celestia's wing silently returns to her back, and her smile seemed to remind her that everything would be okay. No, the fuck you won't! I'm sorry, I just had to say it. But come on, we know what's gonna happen. Not like we want it to happen, but it's gonna come anyway. But let's hop on over to our Sunny donators. Top donators: Jessie Smith, Star630, BadassWaffle, Only One Thing, and Ceru, Orion. Magic, JockeTF, Luciisu, Darkside, Rayden, Narwhals, Blackmoonheart, Pastel, Skaz, Austin, Rolan, Sorbet, Mordor, Mikai, Ruin Scythe, Will, Chris, Twinkie, Rice, Shadow Moon, Luigi, Chancer Crust, Big Smoke, Bobcat, Murder, Princess Jet, Calidus, A Little Mighty, and many more amazing people. Thank you all so much for watching this video and live life to the fullest.